Thank you very much. Among other pursuits in a former life, I was a land developer and home builder, so I have sat many times at the settlement table. I'm not a big fan of regulation, but I'm a huge fan of truth in advertising. I gather what you're doing you think comes closer to truth in advertising than it does to regulation.
Well, we do believe that what borrowers are told on the phone or put on a good faith estimate should be what they receive at the closing table. And so we do want to see that. It has impacted, we do believe that borrowers have paid higher origination charges. And it has, HUD is just, will soon come out with a study done with the Urban Institute where we believe that based on the study that African Americans paid $315 to $532 more than non-minorities after controlling for other relevant factors, and that Latinos paid $290 to $450 more than non-minorities after controlling for all other factors. And when we believe that by making the good faith estimate actually be what the borrower will finally see, that they will have the confidence to shop and obtain the best loan.
When the real cost exceeds by more than 10% the good faith estimate, who pays that?
On the 10%, on the tolerance.
You've gotten a good faith estimate of what it was going to cost. You come to the settlement table and it costs more than that. And your regulations say that if it in fact exceeds that by more than 10%, somebody has to pay that difference. Who pays the difference?
If the borrower wants to go ahead and close through the transaction, then they would go ahead and pay the additional amount of money. We hoped by having the HUD-1 delivered 3 days in advance that there would be a dialogue between the borrower and the lender to either reduce the cost back under the 10% tolerance or less. We would also, if given civil money penalties, would look to see where there was a pattern or practice with that lender, or perhaps report that lender to federal and state regulators also.
But there is no leverage at the settlement table to get those costs reduced if they in fact exceed the good faith estimate.
Well, I think some people probably have the leverage to do that, particularly on
but you
on a
don't. You don't have any leverage. No one is compelled to make up the difference. The buyer either goes through with it or...
He does. He goes through and pays. We have looked at, asked in the rule about the possibility of a time limit to cure, so that if the lender, whether it's 15 days or 30 days or some other time frame, would go back and to reimburse the borrower for the overcharges during that cure period. If they did not, given the, if we were given penalty provisions, then we would start an action, action against the lender.
Do you think that the borrowers that are now in distress did not go to the settlement table with their eyes wide open?
I think that some did not. I know that sometimes borrowers are brought, we have an example in our office where the documents were sent to the consumer's home to sign. It was, in the evening. She signed them without really looking at them. She ended up with an $8,000 prepayment penalty and an adjustable rate interest that was a lot higher, excuse me, and additional charges, I believe, around $12,000. Now, we were able to use just our influence to get her out of that, but there are millions of borrowers that are ripped off every day.
I would like to note in closing, Madam Chairwoman, that the many times I sat at the settlement table, I never read the documents because there were too darned many of them. As a result of regulations, there's a huge pile of documents. I paid a lawyer to sit at the table with me, and I trusted that he had read the documents and gave me good advice. You cannot count, Ms. Jackson, on the consumer to read these documents. They are too technical. There are too darn many of them, a huge pile of them at the usual settlement. Somehow we've got to cut through this so that the buyer really knows what they're signing. I trusted the lawyer that sat with me at the table. I don't know who they trust. Is it their agent?
I don't know, sir. But that is exactly what we're trying to do, is because there are so many documents and different terms of the loan are in different places and different information. So that is why on the first page we put what we thought was most important.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.